headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador. This is From the South, and I'm Sweeney Gray. In a blow to U.S. President Donald Trump's immigration agenda, a federal judge has temporarily blocked his order to ban migrant asylum seekers from crossing the Mexican border into the United States. The ruling could have an immediate impact on thousands of members of the migrant caravan currently gathering in Tijuana. It effectively opens the door for more members of the caravan to request asylum in the U.S. The judge said that the president may not rewrite immigration laws to impose a condition that Congress has expressly forbidden. The Trump administration is forbidden from enforcing the new rules until the court case proceeds on December 19th. Meanwhile, a group of 800 migrants has set out from Mexicali to the border city of Tijuana to join the caravan already there. While many in Mexicali were able to find room inside shelters, others were not so lucky. They say they are going to Tijuana in the hopes of finding shelter while they apply for asylum.
This group you see here is planning to go to Tijuana to see if they can accommodate us or to see if we can get by over there. The truth is that we are a large crowd and we want to see how we can head to Tijuana, even if we can get rides or at least get on the back of trucks, or maybe catch a bus and go bit by bit and see how we can help anyone who couldn't make it. The truth is that there is no room for us here in Mexicali.
The idea of the caravan was for all of us to stay together since the day we set out. They say that the meeting point will be Tijuana, not Mexicali. We are here because the shelters over in Tijuana are full.
And after being temporarily closed down overnight, the border crossing of San Ysidro has been reopened. Authorities say it was closed to beef up security, with 100 soldiers installing barbed wire along the crossing. The government in Colombia has agreed to resume dialogue with the student movement after 40 days of general strike to demand an increase in the education budget. Meanwhile, others from the most remote regions in the country are marching to the capital to support the strike. We have more in this report.
Students from different regions of the country are headed for Bogotá. They plan to arrive there at the end of a 14-day march, which denounced the lack of will by President Iván Duque to heed the calls of the students.
We receive the children of the Manigua with arms wide open because they're traveling 600 kilometers of rebellion and are fighting all the way to Bogotá, to the cement jungle from the Amazon. And because, with all the love we receive, we're continuing this struggle, which is the national student movement.
In the midst of improvised community dinners, the 14-day of indefinite strike was complete. Students asked for resources for the country's 32 public universities.
We've been walking from the Espinal municipality for 6 days. We joined the march of the Southern Amazon of Columbia University, which has been active for more than 14 days. Students
reject the criminal ways in which they've been treated by the state and the public for abuse in peaceful mobilizations.
They ignoring us is also repression, which has been applied to us since we left our territories. They persecute us and threaten us.
From Cauca, another group of students also marched toward Bogotá.
We started a march towards Bogotá to defend public education, to defend our society and our basic right to education. The public force has been repressive against the student movement.
University teachers and workers also announced that they will join the strike.
The teachers of the university community are pleased to support the student movement because we also defend public education.
For November 22, indigenous communities will start another indefinite strike. On the 23rd, transport workers will do the same. And on the 28th, the big national strike of students, teachers, ethnic communities and worker unions will take place to protest against the counterproductive policies of Iván Duque's government.
Security forces have clashed with students and pro-indigenous activists in Chile during a protest in front of the presidential palace in the capital, Santiago. Police vehicles sprayed water against protesters who were calling for the resignation of Interior Minister Andrés Chadwick. This comes almost a week after the Mapuche community member Camilo Catrayanca was killed during a police operation. Security forces also used tear gas in an attempt to stop the demonstration.
We've always known that in Chile they are repressing the indigenous people. This war started a long time ago. This repression has been in place for many previous governments because they want to throw the Mapuche off their lands to establish forest industries.
It is not enough that these people resigned. The ones who were in charge of the operation should also be fired.
People also protested in the Mapuche community of Timucuicui, where Catrayanca was from. Clashes between community members and the police left at least 6 people wounded, a pregnant woman among them. People abroad are also condemning the murder of the young Mapuche activist. Hundreds of people gathered in New Zealand to demand that justice be served during the Chilean President Sebastián Piñera's official visit. And the former Venezuelan minister and diplomat Ali Rodriguez Araque has died in Havana. Rodriguez Araque served in various positions under the late president Hugo Chavez and the current president Nicolas Maduro. He was known for being a dedicated public servant and a socialist who also held the position of Secretary General of UNASUR. He was 81 years old. We'll take a short break now. More news in a minute.
With developing events being presented through analysis. Our coverage transcends borders. With renowned journalist Walter Martinez.
Salud amigos, tripulantes de nuestra querida, contaminada y única nave espacial.
Dossier. Weekdays. Only on Telesur.
Y ponga usted las cámaras, señor director.
Welcome back. A week ahead of the G20 meeting in Argentina, Latin American leaders are hosting the first worldwide forum on critical thinking. The theme of the event is fighting for equality, social justice, and democracy. During the 4-day meeting, leaders will discuss social issues affecting the region. And during Monday's session, former presidential candidate and progressive politician from Colombia, Gustavo Petro, reflected on how inequality provokes violence and benefits the rich.
Colombia is the fourth society with more inequality in the world, along with Brazil and Chile, because Latin America is the most unequal region in the world. And this inequality provokes violence, terror, as it has occurred in Colombia, and it spreads a kind of anesthesia in our society and a lack of political thinking. It has been occurring for 70 years.
And Chile's Beatriz Sanchez has called on the left not to give up to right-wing governments. She was commenting on a political wave that is currently engulfing Latin America.
Despite the dominance of right-wing governments, the system has fissures, and it is through these fissures that we enter, bringing common sense to what our policies are. And it is difficult, especially in Chile, where neoliberalism has been settling our mind. We need to transform common sense in sense for the people.
November 24th will mark the 2-year anniversary of the peace agreement signed between the Colombian government and the FARC. In this special series, Telesur takes a look at the details of the agreement, this time analyzing its plan for rural reform.
2 years ago, Colombia's oldest armed conflict came to an end, opening up a new chapter in the country's history in which dialogue would replace weapons.
We have moved forward despite many difficulties. The armed conflict was stopped. The loss of life and the bombings stopped. People appreciate this change. But even so, social leaders have continued to get killed. And it's sad to see that this violence continues.
One of the most ambitious points of this agreement is the comprehensive rural reform, which sought to resolve rural inequality. 2 years later, little progress has been made.
We planned the creation of land fund, which will make with the lands we recover for the state in order to give lands to those who don't have them. Right now, it is very difficult because ex-combatants haven't received lands to start their productive projects. Most of them are campesinos, and all of them want to settle in the countryside after the enforcement of agribusiness initiatives, but they have no lands to do it.
This is a concerning situation. Recent studies made by public and private universities highlight that during these last 2 years, the rural reform has only increased by 13.86%.
This is totally disappointing. This process made us believe in the coming transformation. Sadly, nothing of what was planned with the peace agreements has been made.
The lack of action from the Colombian state, added to violence, risks the agreements and lives of those who live in Colombia's countryside.
Today, violence is returning to these territories. This is getting worse, and it's affecting the poorest in Colombia. More social leaders keep being murdered, and the threats and persecution against campesinos, Afro-descendants, and indigenous people have increased.
The situation in Colombia is critical. According to a recent study by Oxfam Colombia, the country is the most unequal in Latin America in terms of land distribution. Only 1% of the biggest ranches in Colombia represent 81% of the territory. Many Congress members insist in supporting a neoliberal system that goes against the agreements and those who day by day work the lands.
The lack of support for new systems to access lands mentioned in the peace agreements kept developing, but on the other side of the country, other policies keep alive lands concentration. It is very difficult to change this system model applied in the rural areas. The agreement says one thing, but the enforcement of public policies does another different.
In spite of the current discouraging panorama, those who left weapons behind are working in Congress to keep this struggle alive.
We knew that this was going to be difficult, but not so much. We didn't know the intentions of the government in regards to fulfill this, and now we find bigger challenges. But we won't quit. We'll keep fighting for peace, and that means social investment and justice.
Neither the government who signed the agreements nor the government which must enforce it have presented a reform for agro-policies, which assist in realizing the first topic of the peace treaties. That could change more than 8 million Colombian lives, victims of the armed conflict.
Peru's President Martin Vizcarra has spoken to the Uruguayan President Barry Vasquez about the asylum claim filed by former President Alan Garcia. Vizcarra says his government will release a document explaining its position on the matter, but he insists that this isn't a case of political persecution.
Here in Peru, you can ask all political departments. There is no political persecution here in our country. There exists full judicial procedures. We all respect the Constitution and our laws.
Costa Rica has entered its 11th week of a general strike against a new tax reform scheme proposed by the government. It's been almost 3 months since workers have been protesting the tax reform because they believe it will hurt the most vulnerable. The National Assembly approved the new scheme while the judiciary has questioned if it could affect the country's financing. It has become the longest strike in Costa Rica's history. Ecuadorian students have protested against massive cuts to the public education budget, a reduction of $145 million. Our correspondent in Quito, Denise Herrera, has this report.
The Faculty of Jurisprudence at the Central University of Ecuador was the meeting point for hundreds of peaceful and organized students to express a clear message to the President Lenin Moreno: no cuts to public and private education in the country.
We are gathered here against the budget cut that the current government wants to make to the public and private universities. We are against the cut of $145 million to Ecuadorian education.
Ecuadorian students from both public and private universities have said that are extremely concerned about the general budget for 2019. The budget was reduced by 10% since the previous year. The students are demanding that funding be returned to higher education institutions and say that it is necessary to increase the budget and to expand access to the higher education system.
Today the students have decided to take over the public spaces of our city in order to demand that the government think this over well. They better not mess with education. Ecuadorian citizen, the students will be organizing marches around the country.
This is a government that is against the people. What we're seeing now is cuts in public spending on education and health. That's what we're experiencing. This is outrageous because they are prioritizing the needs of the economic elite and not the needs of the people.
The peaceful protest was held all throughout the main streets of the historic center in Quito. They marched toward the presidential palace with intention to meet President Lenin Moreno, but they were blocked by police.
The police has always been the tool of oppression towards the people. Today, for example, we can see that they didn't allow us to enter. Those in uniforms also have children studying, and yet they still defend the oppressor.
The students are also proposing a discussion table which will include all sectors of higher education to discuss the budget. They warn that this is just the first mobilization of several that will be held around the country against the budget cut proposed by the Minister of Economy and Finance, Richard Martinez. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Ecuador.
The Bolivian army is showing off its military technology and the effectiveness of its locally designed and manufactured missiles, the B-1M1. President Evo Morales and his defense minister attended the military exercises where over 8,000 soldiers took part. Bolivia's army is currently celebrating its 208th anniversary. The Brazilian drug trafficker Marcelo Pinheiro has been deported from Paraguay after killing a woman who visited him in prison. Pinheiro is known as one of the leaders of the criminal group Comando Vermelho. He is a known drug and weapons dealer. The authorities suspect he stabbed the 18-year-old woman to delay his extradition to Brazil. He will now be transferred to a prison in Sao Paulo. Heading to Trinidad now for the latest update in the OWTU versus Pontchartrain legal saga. The union that represents the majority of workers in the petroleum company has secured a win in the industrial court. The Oilfield Workers Trade Union had taken the government to court to challenge its plans to close the state-owned refinery. On Monday, the industrial court ruled in the union's favor as it considered Pontchartrain had breached the Industrial Relations Act by not consulting the union before it made the decision to close down. However, the union's win is limited since the court cannot prevent the refinery from closing. Both parties have been ordered to meet on Tuesday. Pontchartrain is appealing the ruling.
Of the employees who work there as an early retirement package.
Opposition groups in Haiti are calling for a strike to demand transparency in the management of national resources. This after protests took over the streets on Sunday. At least six people were killed and 20 others were injured in clashes. President Jovenel Moïse has called for unity in an attempt to address instability in the country. November 20th is International Transgender Day of Remembrance. This day pays tribute to victims of transphobia. At least 369 trans people have been killed in 2018. According to the organization Trans Respect, 4 of the most dangerous countries in the world for trans people are Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, and the United States. And a scientific expedition will leave Colombia en route to Antarctica. 75 crew members and 35 experts are part of the scientific expedition. The scientists will work on 19 projects focused on maritime safety, geology, oceanography, and climate change. The expedition is set to return to Colombia in February 2019.
colombianos y mujeres y edades y un grupo de...
And it's the second break of the newscast. Stay with us. More news after this.
The life is full of moments. Moments of fight. Moments of hope. Moments that transcend. Moments that you can live in. Telesur documentaries. Sundays. Only on Telesur.
Welcome back. France's Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire says he believes that the auto executive Carlos Ghosn is no longer fit to lead the Renault-Nissan-Mitsubishi alliance. The board is expected to meet on Tuesday to discuss temporarily replacing Ghosn as the chief executive. But Le Maire urged the group to act quickly to put an interim management structure in place. The French government has a 15% stake in Renault. Ghosn was arrested in Japan over claims of misconduct. He is accused of having understated his income and misusing company assets for personal gain.
We need governance, of course. We need an interim governance. So this morning, I will meet with the appointed administrator, Philippe Lagayette, and the state representatives at the Renault Administration Board to ask them to immediately set up an interim governance because Mr. Ghosn isn't able to lead the company.
Britain's cabinet ministers have met at number 10 Downing Street as the Prime Minister faces a leadership challenge from within her own party over her Brexit deal. Theresa May faces an uphill battle to get the deal approved by Parliament. Her Conservatives do not have a parliamentary majority, and it is not clear whether she can persuade lawmakers to back her agreement. Prime Minister May is racing to firm up the final deal before a crucial EU summit on November 25th. One person has died and 44 others have been injured in Spain when a commuter train derailed. A landslide reportedly triggered the early morning crash in Barcelona. Rescue workers have been trying to free just over 100 passengers on board. Over the last few days, heavy rains caused flooding and landslides in the north. Now let's take a look at some of the other stories making headlines around the world.
6 Zambian civil society activists, including popular musician Chama Fumba, have appeared in court on charges of refusing to obey lawful orders. The 6 were arrested last year outside Parliament during a demonstration by civil society organizations against the misuse of public funds. They pleaded not guilty and insist they had a right to protest within the grounds of Parliament.
It's a logistical nightmare to ensure that you can arrange for 6 people to appear in court on every single day without one of you missing. Because if one of you misses, then your bond can be revoked. So you can imagine what kind of pressure that is on us. But other than that, such is life. I think, like I say, the bigger question is, can our money stop being stolen?
Clashes have erupted in Sri Lanka during a protest held by Buddhist monks. Police deployed water cannons and tear gas against protesters who were demanding the release of their Buddhist leader. The leader has been condemned to 19 years in prison over contempt of court charges. President Maithripala Sirisena has issued an apology to the monks. Thousands of workers at South Africa's largest gold producer are going on strike after the collapse of wage negotiations between the company and their union. The Association of Mine Workers and Construction Union announced that its members will go on strike at Sibanye Gold Mine after the company said it cannot afford to meet the workers' demands for higher wages. The union represents more than half of Sibanye's 32,000 workforce. Amateur fighters in Egypt have recreated an American-style wrestling show with painted faces and dramatic costumes. They have performed before hundreds of fans in a schoolyard in the city of Ismailia. Athletic moves and a careful choreography under bright lights and blaring music made the audience break into applause.
North Korea has blown up some of its frontline guard posts as part of an agreement to ease tensions along its heavily fortified border with South Korea. Last month, the two Koreas signed a military pact. The pact includes an agreement to halt all hostile acts, establish a no-fly zone around the border, and the gradual removal of guard posts, firearms, and landmines. And finally, the Chinese President Xi Jinping has paid his first visit to the Philippines. President Rodrigo Duterte welcomed Xi Jinping in what he described as a milestone visit. The Chinese president has promised a $24 billion investment. He's also offering infrastructural loans. And we've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at tellusenglish.net. And join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Tell Us Your English. I'm Soini Gray. Thank you for watching.